So, my husband Thor, yes, I know, we're Scandinavian, and I have been together for 5 years, happily married for 2. From the beginning, it was made very clear on both sides that neither of us wanted children, and that there wouldn't ever be a chance of either of us changing our minds further down the road. My husband got a vasectomy a couple of months before the wedding, but due to the fact that I have cysts on my ovaries, PCOS, we decided it was best to leave well enough alone on my end, at least for now. Since getting my tubes tied could lead to complications, and a full hysterectomy would send me into early menopause, and to prevent that, I'd be on estrogen supplements for 20+ years. I am, however, on birth control. I don't particularly believe in soulmates, but I would say Thor's the perfect man for me. I love him more than I can say, and things have only gotten better since we got married. Last year, we got a dog, Hector, and a cat, Ario, and since then, our tiny family finally felt complete. Enter Thor's best friend Martin, and his wife Tessa. Fake names. Martin and Tessa had been based in the UK during the pandemic, but Tessa lost her job in the middle of 2020, and Martin was up for a contract renewal by Christmas time the same year, so they decided to move back home in January 2021. My husband was thrilled, and I was thrilled for him. I had only met Martin a couple of times before, since he left for the UK just after Thor and I began dating. He'd been back to visit on several occasions, however, 4 times without Tessa, and 1 time with, for my and husband's wedding. The pandemic put a stop to that for obvious reasons, though Thor and Martin kept in contact via Zoom and Discord, where they'd play games together or watch movies or episodes at the same time. Honestly, it was sweet, and the few times I met Martin and Tessa, they were kind and full of good humor. For the first few months of their return, they lived a few hours away, so Martin would be close to his mother for a while. But around August, they had managed to buy a house in town, just a couple of streets away from ours. Thor was beyond himself with excitement. I remember we used to lie in bed at the end of the day in the weeks heading up to the move, and he'd talk about all the stuff the 4 of us could do together. Thor is an amazing guy, but he's slow at befriending people, and having his best friend back close to him opened up the door for this giddy excitement in him that was so amazing to see. I also felt guilty, not having realized how much the lack of close friendships had been bothering him, and I promised myself that I'd try to do what I could to make this work out, since it was obviously super important to him. So Martin and Tessa moved to our town, and immediately we began to spend a good deal of time together. Almost every weekend, we're at their place or they're over at ours, trying to take advantage of the long summer evenings before fall weather takes over. It's nice. Early on, the topic of children had come up, and this is where I admit I made a mistake. I've become so used to people taking issue over our decision not to have kids, as if it offends them personally, that I've come to be a bit aggressive about the topic whenever it pops up. So when asked about children, I happily replied with, "Me. No children now, no children ever." Tessa, "Oh, you can't have children." Me, No, we could, we just don't want to, ever." Tessa, "But why?" Me shrugging, "Because we don't want any. We're happy as we are, and we don't feel like adding children to the mix will make our lives better." Tessa, getting visibly upset, "But you can have children. Why would you turn down such a gift? How selfish can you be?" Me, undiplomatic, as I tend to get when angry. "It's none of your ducking concern, Tessa. I don't see any of your kids around here." At this point, Tessa bursts into tears and runs into their house. Martin glares at me and follows in after her. Thor just sighs and says, "That probably wasn't the best way to handle things, OP." He was right, of course, but I have had it up to ducking here with people who believe they have any right to judge us about our own adult life decisions, and I won't let friends or family off the hook either. Thor suggests we go home to let everyone calm down, and I agree. Nothing like a calm and kind partner to make you realize when you've ducked up. We clean as best as we can on the outside table, and simply walk back. Thor texts Martin to say we went home and that we could talk later. When I had a moment to actually use my brain, it was pretty obvious what reasons might cause Tessa to be so upset with me, and while it doesn't excuse her judgmental attitude, it explains to some degree, and it did make me regret my words. The next day, Tessa and Martin came over to our house for dinner, and I apologized to Tessa for how I handled things the day before. However, I remained firm that I didn't appreciate the judgment I received from her. Tessa apologized as well, and confirmed my suspicions. She can't have children of her own. She'd had 3 miscarriages before they dug up the courage and went to get confirmation that she was unlikely to ever have kids, because, and I quote, "the quality of my eggs are crap." Thankfully, the tension kind of dissipated after that, and we had an enlightening discussion about how hard it was on the other end of the spectrum. As in, wanting kids with all your heart, but unable to have any. My heart honestly broke for both of them. Martin had to leave at one point, and when he came back, it was pretty obvious that he'd been crying. We didn't go too far into it, but it seemed like either adoption wasn't a possibility, or they weren't willing to go through the stress of it, emotionally and financially. I'm unsure which it is, but they both said it was off the table. Thor and I assured them that we'd be here for them and help them however we could. Oh, I wish we hadn't said that. Now, let me preface this by saying that Tessa and I look similar. Not quite alike, but we have the same color hair and are about the same build. If I cut my hair to her length and people saw us from behind, we might be mistaken for the other. Our faces and eye color are different, though. It started with one off-in comment from Martin about that similarity. Thor and I just smiled it off and didn't think much of it, but it must have pinged my radar somehow, because I remember it so clearly. And then again and again. God, sometimes I just can't tell you two apart. Not often enough to creep me out, but often enough for me to be wary of it, like an overused joke. Then, on Wednesday, Thor came out of the room where he'd been gaming with the weirdest look on his face, enough for me to notice. I asked him what was wrong, and he said, "Thor, has Martin ever done anything to make you feel uncomfortable?" Me. Not that I can think of. Why? Thor. He just said something really weird. Me. What did he say? Thor was quite reluctant to repeat what Martin had said, but I had no way of knowing what kind of nugget he was about to drop in my hands. Thor. That, if you and him had a kid, he could easily pass it off as Tessa's. Me. What the absolute duck? Thor. Yeah, I said the same thing, and then he played it off as a joke. I told him it was a weird ducking thing to say. Obviously, the both of us were weirded out. Thor insisted that he'd go speak to Martin alone that weekend, because the event bugged him, and he wanted to have a chat about it. He never actually got the chance to, because Martin and Tessa invited us both over for some important news Friday evening. Thor promised me that we didn't have to go if I didn't want to, but I assured him it would be fine, that he could get his chance to pull Martin aside to talk if he wanted to. Now, this is where I begin to lose my grip on my emotions. Having to recount this makes my blood boil so hard, I'm afraid I'm going to explode. It makes it hard to write this down in a way that makes sense. So it goes like this. Just before midday yesterday, I get a phone call from an OBGYN clinic I've never heard of before, asking to confirm an appointment I've never made. I tell them there must be some kind of mistake. The lady on the phone confirms she will cancel the appointment and apologizes for the mix-up. Weird, but nothing super alarming at the time. I should have realized something here, but hindsight is 20/20. Thor comes home from work. I finish up my own stuff and we walk the couple of streets over to Martin and Tessa's. We enter through the garden door and hear Martin calling out to us from the living room. Him and Tessa are sitting together on one couch with their hands clasped together as they both beam at us as we enter the room. We sit down opposite them. Martin begins by thanking us for coming, turns to me and says, with a tone as if he's bestowing a great gift on me, "Martin, there's no point in beating around the bush. Tessa and I would officially like to ask you to be the surrogate of our baby. OP, we have it all arranged. We found a lovely doctor, and of course we'll pay for food and expenses along the way. Everything is taken care of, but we want it to be you." Thor and I sit there, stunned. I honestly didn't know what to even say for a few seconds. Then, I kind of laugh incredulously and say, "What? I told you I never wanted kids, Martin. What makes you think I'd want to give birth to someone else's? Also, I'm fairly sure surrogacy is illegal here." It is. Martin then begins talking about how it's perfect, that Tessa and I look so much alike, and through that I figure he wants me to be the egg donor as well. That it's doubly perfect because Thor and I don't want children, so we wouldn't have any trouble giving up the child. That this would bring us all even closer together, that we'd be doing them a huge favor. That there are ways around the law if I would simply mark Martin down as the father and grant him full custody after the birth, etc., etc. I have no idea what his plan was for insemination, but I'd rather not ducking think about it, to be honest. Then it kind of clicked for me that the phone call from the clinic meant that Martin had probably gone and made an appointment in my ducking name. Something you have to understand is that in my country, we have a kind of social security number in place that allows you to do everything. Banks, hospitals, phones, school, work, taxes, driving, appointments, passports, job search, financial assistance, you name it. You need that number for everything, so every citizen has one. Which is also why everyone needs to keep their number very, very private. Martin would have needed my number to make such an appointment. And I flipped my ducking lid. I don't think I've ever been this mad in my entire life. The way Martin had planned it all out without ever approaching me, and just assumed that I'd be on board. That asking me was almost just a formality at the very end, like an afterthought after everything was set up and ready. That he expected that I'd be fine to donate an egg as well, as if that carried no weight at all. And again, how are they planning to fertilize the egg, unless the grand solution was manual ducking insertion? That he expected I'd want to carry a child to term with all the risks and physical strain that entails, no big deal. And that because I've chosen a child-free life, he thought I'd just throw the child at him once all was said and done, and be thankful for the experience, because it brought us closer together. Or the fact that they both knew I didn't ever want a child, and still thought this was a good ducking idea in the first place. That he thought I'd just be chill, breaking the law by becoming a surrogate. Or, worst of all, that he had somehow found out my identification number and used it to book appointments for me before I ever said yes, which is super ducking illegal, by the way. And also why the absolute duck, if by some crazy chance I'd said yes, I would have been making those appointments myself. I don't see the logic at all. I asked Martin about the gynecologist, and he completely clammed up. Oh yeah, I wonder why. At this point, Tessa's bawling her eyes out, and Martin is just sitting there, looking honest to God, hurt. Thor gets up and tells them that we're leaving, and not to contact us unless we reach out. I tell them the many ways they can go duck themselves, and practically storm out of the house, Thor right on my heels. We didn't even make it one street over before I burst into tears. Thor hugged me and dragged me the rest of the way home. He let me cry myself out, then asked me if I wanted to get away for a while, and I said yes. He did everything, the absolute sweetheart. Called work to take the week off. Called a sister to ask if she could take the animals for a few days. Got us a few nights in a hotel in the closest big city. Nothing super fancy, just far enough away that it would feel like we got some distance from the whole thing. He left for about 30 minutes and came back with the spare keys Martin and Tessa had for our home. I hadn't even thought about that. I asked him how it went, and he didn't want to talk about it. We packed the car and drove through the night, and now I'm lying in a very comfy bed next to my husband, and unable to enjoy it, because I'm so ducking angry. I think the worst part of this is if Martin and Tessa had come to me honestly, and without expectation, I would seriously have considered donating an egg to them. In my country, it's only illegal to have surrogacy within the country. Technically, you could pay for someone in America to be a surrogate, and that's perfectly legal. Ethical? Probably not. But since they've chosen this weird, deceitful, illogical, and actually illegal way of manipulating me into something they both knew I didn't want in the first place, I have no space within me to feel sorry for them any longer. I keep getting paranoid in hindsight. Should my gut instinct have told me sooner that something was up? I feel like the escalation happened so quickly and came practically out of nowhere. From, hey, you kind of look like my wife, to, have our baby, way too ducking quickly. Martin and Tessa were over at our house all the time, too. They could have rummaged around and found my identity number at any point in time. I'll likely never know when that happened. I found all my papers and hid them away somewhere better before we left. But it doesn't help to erase the feeling of violation, or the fact that I'm going to have to get a new number, which is a process, considering how many things in life it's connected to. Practically everything. I told Thor about the call from the OBGYN earlier, and Thor came to the same conclusion I had, and now he's even more distraught. I told him I wanted to tell the police about it, and he agreed wholeheartedly. So I'm going to do that on Monday. Plus, I'll be calling my GP and ask them to see what appointments have been made in my name and when. Thor is so sad. He keeps apologizing to me, and I keep telling him that none of this is his fault. I haven't forgotten that in all of this he's lost the best friend he ever had. The one he was so excited to have close by again. I keep fiddling with this, trying to add bits I've forgotten, probably a lot, and trying to make my sentences make more sense, but I'm tired, and I kinda want to forget that today, yesterday, ever happened. For now, I'm just going to try to enjoy this mini vacation. Go get some nice food, enjoy my time with my husband, and try not to think about what waits for us at home on Monday. And to anyone who might ask about the fact that as a person with PCOS, your chances of getting pregnant are lowered anyway. Yes, thank you, I realize that, but it is so very much beside the point. Reading this was like reading a horror novel. It just kept getting worse and worse and is absolutely my ducking nightmare. I'm also child-free by choice, and totally relate to the constant judgment and condescension you get. But holy hell, for your friends to ask this of you, even expected of you, disgusting, entitled, and disrespectful. These people are the worst kind of entitled, disgusting, manipulative a-holes. You are absolutely right to feel the way you do. These people are insane, and I wouldn't be surprised if this escalates. Please press charges. I kept reading this because it feels like a fictional novel. It is unreal that these people did things like this and assumed it would be okay. And you would be like, I don't want my own kids, but sure, I'll have yours. I'm so incredibly sorry this happened to you, and I'm sorry your husband lost his best friend. I know infertility can cause people to do things they never dreamed of, but this was completely out of line. Assuming someone's eggs and uterus are for your own use whenever you want is just bizarre.